Can you hear me okay there? Great, okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Very warm welcome to the University of Regina. My name is Sean Tucker. I'm a faculty member at the university. Tonight we're meeting on Treaty 4 territory. This is the traditional land of the Blackfoot, Cree, Saulteaux, Sioux peoples, and also the homeland of the Métis. Land is central to Indigenous peoples, and indeed the spirit of the treaty is that we act as stewards of this land. The purpose of the University of Regina is to educate through research and the exchange of knowledge and ideas. Tonight is your opportunity to learn and ask questions about the oil refinery safety. And given the different points of view on tonight's topic, I would ask that our discussion be considered and respectful. The discussion is being filmed and later will be posted on the U of R's YouTube page. We are very fortunate to have two highly trained, experienced panelists with us this evening. Dan Josephson was born and raised in Regina and has worked at the co-op refinery for over 37 years as a process operator. He has served on his local union executive, now known as Unifor 594, for 29 years and held roles such as shop steward, chief shop steward, vice president, negotiating chair, progression review panel member, OH&S co-chair, and pension advisory co-chair. That's a lot of committee work, Dan. Our second panelist, Mr. Perry Feltham, has worked at the North Atlantic Refinery in Come By Chance, Newfoundland and Labrador, as a fire and safety technician and in maintenance for over 28 years. He has held a number of positions within the Steelworkers Union Local 9316, including shop steward, president, vice president. He is also co-chair of the Joint Health and Safety Environment Committee. In 2013, Perry was part of a team that developed and implemented the first process safety management code of practice in Canada. Perry is also assistant fire chief in his hometown of Clarenville. Both Perry and Dan share a passion for safety, and thank you both for agreeing to participate tonight. Really appreciate that. And Perry, thank you for traveling some 5,000 kilometers from home to Regina, and I'm really grateful you made the trip. And I know you're both you and Dan are passionate about safety, so thanks again for participating. I do want to address a couple other matters before we begin. One is the employer voice on the panel. Unfortunately, we don't have an employer voice on tonight's panel. I did want to share that in early August, I invited the co-op refinery and later Federated Co-op to participate. In early October, the co-op refinery informed me that they were unavailable to participate. Got that? Okay. After that, I reached out to the Canadian Fuels Association, which lobbies on behalf of the industry. Representatives from both their Calgary and Ottawa offices were also unavailable to speak this evening. Tonight's discussion is moderated by Dr. Carol Schick, who recently retired after nearly 20 years as a professor in the Faculty of Education at the University of Regina. The format of tonight's event will begin with 10-minute introductions from Dan and Perry, and then we'll move to questions from the audience. Given the sensitive nature of the topic, questions can be asked either at the microphone. We'll have one set up here, there's one over there, or you can ask a question anonymously using a cue card. These have been handed out, and there's some pens floating around too. And I'll come around and pick them up, and Carol will ask questions of the panel. And before turning it over to Carol, I just want to thank Eagleclaw Thom for helping to organize tonight's event. There's Eagle there in front filming tonight. And thank you very much, Eagle, for helping with tonight. And I want to thank you, Carol, again for moderating. It's very kind of you to do this. Thank you both. Last thing from me, there's a yellow bowl at the back. That's for donations for a new safety association in Saskatchewan, the Saskatchewan First Nations Safety Association. Toby Denemy, whom I work with, I reached out to him and said we could do a donation tonight and they could use some help with buying some equipment for training at First Nations communities. So if you feel like donating, it's up at the back row there. And with that, I'll turn it over to Carol. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Sean. Thanks for the introduction of tonight's panel too, and especially I'd like to welcome everyone here. This is a significant thing to be able to discuss, and I appreciate that the university is one such place where debate and disagreement and open conversation is in fact what should be able to be taking place here. So I think I would like to invite everyone to feel welcome to make your remarks known, to ask the questions that you would like to have heard. And we have two experts here who can take those up for you. We appreciate that the speakers have brought their knowledge to us. And as Sean mentioned, you can plan either to bring your remarks to either of the microphones or to write them, and I will speak them for you. The format is simple. We will hear from Dan and from Perry, and thanks again, Perry. I know Sean has said this, but I'm impressed that you came all this way. And we've already had a conversation about it's cold everywhere here, but this is the dry cold and there's the wet cold. We always have that conversation. So, after they've completed the remarks, and they will speak for approximately 10 minutes each, I will call for conversations and questions from the floor. And just in the interest of keeping the evening going, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you to keep your questions to less than, say, 59 seconds, to be precise. To say a minute, things go on longer than that, but I think that if it's more than 59 seconds, it's probably not a question. And if you don't mind, I will also exercise my right as a chair to ask people who haven't spoken yet before we go to the second questioner. So I have not much more to say than that. I'd like to invite either of our two speakers, and I'm not sure who has, if we flipped a coin.
We haven't decided.
Okay. As our guest, I'd like to invite you, Perry,
Okay.
to begin.
All right. Thank you. Everyone hear me? Yeah. I don't usually use a microphone, but... Well, first of all, I want to thank Sean for inviting me here to Regina. It's been great the last few days I've been here. You got a nice city, nice place. I come from the northeast of Canada, northeast coast, an island called Newfoundland. Cold, wet, not dry cold like you got here, but we got lots of snow. Lots of snow. Not yet, but we do get it. I've been in the North Atlantic Refining for just going on 29 years. I started there as a fire and safety technician. I've been in the fire service 34 years total, my hometown. Industry firefighting, residential firefighting, two different aspects. But say the least, no matter whatever fire you tackle, the wet goes on the red. That's the bottom line. You just got to keep that in your mind. Safety, before we get going, I'm not here to badmouth the refinery I work in, or the refinery that's in this town, or any other refinery that operates. But I'm here to try to help to make everybody go home at the end of the day. I've seen death, I've dealt with death. We had 2 folks killed back in '98 in an explosion in our refinery. Not a very pretty picture when you get someone killed. You got families, you got kids that grow up without a father. One particular gentleman had 2 daughters that graduated that next year with no father to walk them up the aisle. They got married, never had a father to walk them up the head of the church. That's sad. There's no one on the face of the earth this day and age should have to go through that to make a living to support their families. Now you can have everything in place to good as it. You can, whatever you do, you can have a good outcome, and you can do whatever is possible in your means and have a bad outcome. That's the nature of the beast you work in. But over the years, I've found our international union out of America, we've got 48 refineries in the States that deal with process safety management very big. Yeah, they still kill people. You're in the business that if you don't keep your hair up, you're going to kill people. That's not the way it should be. Now, I can drive down the road tomorrow and someone come across and strike my truck and kill me. But you should not have to go to work with that fear in the back of your mind every day that you may not get home to see your family when your shift is done. From experience, I've dealt on the bargaining committees with different managers. We've been on 5 times, 5 different owners. Every owner got his own way of running the plant. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, but a manager is there to make money for the owners. Bottom line. If you don't make money, he's going home. Someone else is going to come and do it. But a lot of people don't realize that a safe refinery makes more money than a refinery that's having incidents every 2nd or 3rd month. When you got an incident, your plant comes down, or a section of your plant comes down. The cost of bringing it back up is quite a bit of money. Tell you me, it's quite a bit of money. But if, not only in the refining industry, that's what we're talking on tonight, but in the industry, if you got a union that's representative, you got a voice that can go and argue for you. But there's a lot of work sites that don't have union representation. If they refuse a job, I'm sorry, you're going home. But with a union environment, you got protection that you can argue and take to arbitration if it gets that far. But it don't need to get that far. If only everybody would sit and talk it out and come to agreement, there is an happy medium in between. There's a right and there's a wrong, and then there's in between. But a lot of people, bargaining unit people as well, and I've been quite heavy in the union for the last 28 years, sometimes you got to give a little to get a lot. And that's just the way the industry works. Not only in the refining industry, but in the industry. You got to give and take. You can't be all one side. If you do, someone's going to get the hair up on their head, and they're not going to agree with you. That's the way it is. But in refining, I'll go back to refining specifically. Safety is a big thing. All you're doing is boiling oil. You're not running milk. You're not running sugar. You're boiling oil. And you know what the outcome is when what's in the pipes get outside. You got problems. And over the years at Cummins Chance Refinery, we've had many fires, many problems. But if you contain it and keep it in the pipes, it's a very safe environment to work in. But to do that, you got to have everybody on board. You got to have operators sit down, engineers sit down, and management sit down and say which is the safest way we can do this. There is a safe way. I'm sorry, but there is a safe way to do it. That don't cost you a big pile of money. It's just a matter of meeting and coming up with all the ideas. How can you tell a senior operator that's been there for 25 years that no, you can't run this way, today we're going to do this? That operator knows that unit like the back of his hand. He can tell you what you can do and what you can't do. But if you ignore that operator and take a junior or young buck, not against young bucks, someone got to take out the old fellas. Right? That's the nature of the beast. But you can't take a young buck that haven't seen the problems that certain lineups have done and everything else and say, you're going to sit in on this meeting with us and we want your ideas and we're going to put this forward. Just don't work, I'm sorry. So I'm here for the next hour. You can throw whatever you want at me after Dan is finished, but like I say, I'm not here to badmouth refinery here or the refinery home. We've had our issues. The boys got their issues. Every refinery got issues. Thank you.
Dan.
Thank you, Perry. Thank you, Carol. As Sean mentioned, my name is Dan Josephson. I have worked at the Co-op Refinery for over 37 years now as a process operator. I've been in process my entire career. I'm going to start out by saying that I do not speak for the refinery. I am not authorized to speak for them, and I do not represent the management of the refinery. I am here representing the workers, the unionized workers of the refinery. So if, as part of the condition of my employment, I have to sign a confidentiality agreement, there may be questions that come from the floor tonight about refinery policies or procedures or specific incidents that I will not be able to respond to. If you have those type of questions, you need to contact the refinery themselves. I cannot speak for them. So, having said that, what is a process operator? What the heck is it? What do I do? Well, in short, I'm responsible for operating the processing units under my control within the refinery. These are processing units that will refine crude oil, will make gasoline, will make diesel, will make propane and butane. We will upgrade or enhance our products. We will remove impurities, remove sulfur, remove nitrogen, and then process all of these items, producing other byproducts. We produce liquid sulfur as a byproduct as well. What kind of training do you have for this? People say, well, a significant amount. For process operators in virtually every unit, we are third-class steam engineers. We have that ticket. It includes both boiler and refrigeration plant operations. We have training in fall protection. We have training in confined space and entry, in hazardous atmospheres and gas testing of those atmospheres. We have training in respiratory protection and SCBA, or self-contained breathing apparatus use. We have training in WHMIS, which is Workplace Hazardous Material Information Systems. We have basic electrical theory. We have basic instrumentation theory. We have distillation theory. We have pump and compressor theory and operations. We are first aid trained and CPR qualified. We have advanced industrial firefighting training, a significant amount of that. Many of us have incident and on-scene commander training to be able to deal with any incident that comes up as the leader of the incident and direct the individuals and firefighting around you. We have training in OH&S rules and regulations, training in environmental hazards, training on transportation of dangerous goods. We have familiarity with organic chemistry, with inorganic chemistry, physical chemistry, thermodynamics, welding and metallurgy. We have extensive training in unit-specific theory and operation of the operating units that we are in control with. And in addition to that, we have several years of practical experience in the operation of the units that you're trained on. Safety for the operators and for the maintenance people in the refinery is absolutely paramount. It is something that we as workers think of every single day and think about before every single job we do. It is our lives that are on the line first and foremost if something were to happen. And every worker out there takes that very, very seriously. It's not something to be sloughed off. As Perry had mentioned, the most important thing is seeing that both you and your coworkers get to go home at the end of the shift. That's the most important thing. Absolutely. And it's something that we dwell on every single day. We talk about scenarios of what we would do if this happened or if that happened. We'll practice those scenarios. And just to see what we could do better if it was to be real. Safety it's first and foremost in our mind. Absolutely. So with that, thank you, and I'm ready to take any questions.
Thanks. Thanks, Dan.
The question I have, you're talking about safety. Where does the refinery dispose their waste?
Well, again, that would be a fairly specific question that you're asking about the refinery itself and their policies and procedures. That's not something I'm specifically allowed to talk about. I encourage you to call the refinery business office and ask to speak to their communications and public relations people and ask them that question. You may want to be more specific about waste. There are many, many different types of waste. If you have concerns about something in particular, I would encourage you to specify exactly what you were talking about.
I'm wondering if it's safe to have a refinery basically in the middle of a city, in the middle of a residential area, particularly given the possibility of explosions. There was one not too long ago. And then there's the question of emissions. What sorts of emissions are there and how far do they travel?
Good questions. There's absolutely no doubt that refineries and the refinery industry is a hazardous and dangerous industry. You can't sugarcoat that in any way, shape, or form. It is. Is it safe to be in a city? Well, when the refinery was built, the city wasn't there. So the question of is it safe? Well, the city was built around the refinery, not the refinery was built in the middle of a city. So it's a difficult question to answer. I really don't have an answer for you. The safest way to operate any refinery is with experienced, trained people running it. We are the ones, as workers, who do everything we can to ensure that safety is put to the forefront. It's pushed as a focus, and we wish to ensure that everyone, not just the workers, but the people who live around us, are able to enjoy their life and feel safe and secure, knowing that the refinery is doing everything and the workers are doing everything that they can to ensure that safety in the community. As for what types of emissions, again, that is a question I believe you would have to call the refinery management and ask them. I cannot really speak about what types of emissions may be coming out.
Thank you.
Could I just add to what Dan is saying about refineries and living around refinery? If refineries are operated safely and keep the oil in the pipes, it's quite safe. It's quite safe. I've been refineries in America where major highways ran through the center of the refineries. Major highways. But they didn't have the incidents because they took care of corrosion on their insulation. They had proper operating procedures. They had proper training procedures rather than throw a young buck in the unit after 2 months and say, now it is your unit, you run it. I'm sorry, that don't work. You gotta be trained. When it comes to explosions, yeah, you get a refinery going, you got a nasty mess on your hand. But the two boys up there from the fire service can agree with me that one 20-pound tank of propane that's stored in your basement can flatten and level a 1,000-foot bungalow. So you multiply that by, we got propane spare back home with 500,000 barrels in it. It's a lot of propane. But if you control it, it's fine. It's safe the way it is. But if you don't do all your monitoring and all your inspections and all your corrosion on the equipment, you're looking for problems.
You know, I've been listening to you guys on the safety aspect of working inside of the refinery. But have you ever considered having a buffer zone around that refinery where you can't build any more buildings, any dwellings? The question is to you.
Okay, thank you. Have I ever considered it? I would say no, because I have absolutely no input in whether that's a possibility or not. I don't control what gets built around the refinery or where building occurs. I work in the refinery and do my very best with my fellow operators to operate it safely so that it is safe to be around the refinery. I don't know if I could give you any clearer answer than that.
All right, I come out of a steel mill, IPSCO, or Everast, better known as, eh?
Yeah.
We have a buffer zone. You can't build around that plant. Now, they didn't have a buffer zone in the steel mill in Calgary, and they built around the plant, and eventually they shut that plant down because of the noise and the pollution. Same thing happened in Vancouver. Now, those buffer zones are very important, more so probably in the oil industry. Because if something happens, you don't want housing close to the plant. And that could happen.
Yeah, yes, sir, it definitely could. I mean, as I've said, the refinery it's a dangerous business, and the potential is tremendous. All we can do as workers is our very best to ensure that we are focusing on safety and operating and maintaining the plant as safely as we possibly can. As far as a buffer zones, that's something that really falls under the jurisdiction of City Council to determine something like that. We as workers have absolutely no say in what is or isn't or should or shouldn't be around the refinery.
You have a right to lobby them.
Yes, sir, we do, and as does the public as well, and I absolutely encourage every member of the public to become involved in local politics and have their input into what occurs in your community. I think it's a very important aspect of our society.
Oh, next.
Would you be able to answer how long the co-op refinery has been in operation or when it was built?
It was built in the 1930s. 1935. So we've just passed our 83rd anniversary coming up, I believe. So it has been in its current location. It started out much smaller, but it's been in its current location since 1935. We've been a unionized refinery for over 75 years, I believe.
I guess just to touch on a statement made earlier about the public safety and being in a residential area on the refinery. In 2016, there was a major risk assessment report that was released. I guess if you have any more questions about it, I would encourage that you look at that.
Could you pick up the mic?
Heard me okay? We're good?
You have to hold it up. Hold it up.
Public speaking, eh? I guess I encourage you guys to look at that report if you have any questions about public safety regarding the refinery in the residential areas. And as I guess is my question, as Dan mentioned earlier, stating that we take a lot of precautions in our certifications and our safety protocols that we take. I guess I have a question for you, Perry, about what you think about the possibility of having short-term workers enter and what their certification levels bring to a refinery such as ours and the location that it's in.
Are you talking short-term workers or new workers?
I guess in the event of a lockout, having qualified personnel or unqualified personnel or whoever they are come in.
Well,
If you have any experience.
you can't run a refinery unless you got expertise out of your units. I'm not saying bad stuff about management,
No, I'm sorry.
I know what I say, but a manager can manage a refinery, but he don't know the valves and the lineups and each process is out of the units. Call a spade. You do not know it. Now, if someone moved up the ranks, ran the unit for 20 years, and took a management position, yes, that particular fellow could probably run the unit. But anybody new there, they can't run a unit. So I don't know how many managers for workers you got at your refinery here in Regina, but I know back home, there's not enough tickets to run the refinery. So if they lock us out, we're going to the government the next day because they don't have the number of tickets to run her. Simple. That's the way it works. But if you've got qualified people that can operate that refinery, they're going to run it. Whether it's going to be safe, no one knows. Because a lot of the folks don't make the right decision every day. How are they going to make the right decision on a Friday? It's just my point to make on it. But actually, I can't say anything about your management. I don't know what your management is like, or how they even look at safety, or how they look at run the plant. But if they're going to keep the plant running, you got inspectors and you got government officials in this province that should make sure it's safe to run. We don't need to wait for an inquiry. Everybody got to answer questions in an inquiry. But you don't need to get that you never need to get to inquiry. If you can prevent from getting there and get everything the way it's supposed to be, you don't need an inquiry on an incident. The same person that didn't answer the question last week, next week when he gets on the stand, he got to answer the question. I'm sorry. And anybody in a supervisor or management role, or even an operator that puts someone in danger, remember, Bill C-45 is now active in Canada. Now, not that me, for one, or anyone else want to see anybody go to jail. But all I want to see is everybody go home at the end of the day and not get injured. I don't want to see a manager go to jail. That's the last thing I want to see. He's got a life to live too. He's got a family to rear. He's got bills to pay. He don't need to go to jail. But he needs to run the plant safely. That's it.
Would you like to respond?
Yeah, I will. I'll just reiterate that, as I said earlier, the safest way to run a refinery and to run any business is with highly trained, highly experienced workers operating your business. And that is what we have at the refinery. We are highly trained, we are highly experienced, and very dedicated to the safe operation of that refinery. The question was about replacement workers or short-term or people replacing in a lockout. I'm not going to touch on the possibility of any of that, simply to reiterate that we as workers take the safety of that plant very seriously, and if you remove the experience, you increase the risk. It's not a guarantee that something could happen, but it's a risk.
Perry, when we didn't get to talk about the kid who died, you said 98?
98, we had an explosion, we had two workers. 98, there was no procedures in our plant for arc air gouging on panels on the side of a running heater. So the company at the time, we've been owned by 5 different owners, but the company at the time decided they were going to make their turnaround or shut down a little quicker. So they start arc air gouging the sides of the naphtha hydrobond heater. We had an explosion that killed an operator and a maintenance tech. That operator was on my FARC crew for 5 years. We had many calls. Every time I come back to the station, they used to say to me, Felton boy, I hope I never get burned. And that's how the poor guy went. He got burned. Very sad. But after the government officials moved in, they were crawling over the site at the time. And we didn't see them before. Only if you come in for a visit or get a free lunch out of it, that's when they show up. But after that, they were crawling over the place like spiders. After the inquiry, they had an order for the refinery. You cannot do any more hot work on running heaters. But it's too late when you got to put 2 people in the ground to get there. That's sad when you got to do that. That regulation should have been put in before they ever got to that point. But that's what happened to us on March 25th, 1998.
So why did you guys do it then? Why did you do it?
Why did you
perform the work? Did you feel it was safe?
The operators at the time questioned it, but management said, we are doing it. We are doing it. We're going to arc air gouge those panels. We're not going into the firebox of the heater. We're not touching the tubes. But there was an explosion. But they could not pinpoint whether the pinhole tube in the heater was from erosion and corrosion of the tubes or something from the arc air gouge. But after that day, after inquiry, there was no more hot work on live running heaters.
It's a sad reality of life that we as a society tend to come up with rules to prevent accidents after the accidents have occurred. Yeah. And I wish it wasn't that way, because it would be so much better for everyone if we could anticipate the accidents and come up with the plans and the procedures and the policies that would have prevented them in the first place. It would be fantastic, but that's just not the reality. So every time there is an incident, or every time there has been an incident, you try to look at that and say, what went wrong and how do we prevent that from happening again? Whenever, I mean, that is the goal of an occupational health and safety investigation, is to identify what is the root cause of this accident or this incident, and what is the recommendation we can make as an OH&S committee to prevent that from happening again. And that's something that I definitely experienced in a number of investigations wherein I was an occupational health and safety co-chair. You look at an incident, you look at an accident, and you try to figure out how you can prevent that same thing from happening again, because you can't turn back the clock to make it not happen, but you can do everything you can to prevent it from happening again.
I have a question here that partly speaks to that, and it has a few parts, and this is from the audience. And the question is, can you explain how the safety of the workers and the plant is regulated? And some of the specific answers, for example, who is the regulator? And what kinds of audits and inspections are done, and how often? So that, I'll just leave it with that. How is the safety of the workers and the plant regulated? For example, who's the regulator? And can you describe the kinds of audits and inspections that are done, and how often? Perhaps you can start with that.
Well, there are a number of regulators for the refinery as far as safety goes. Of course, there's the Department of Environment. There's Occupational Health and Safety is another regulator of the refinery, of every workplace. Those are probably the two biggest regulators within our industry. Audits and inspections. There is an inspection by Occupational Health and Safety members, committee members, of every unit once a year at a minimum. It can be done more often than that, but it's a very large place, and typically the inspections are done once a year. As far as audits, Occupational Health and Safety Committee does have the right under the regulations to audit procedures as well. I can't speak to really any of the history of that. That would be something that you would have to take up with the refinery management as well to ask that specific question.
Would you like to answer the ones for your own experience? How is the safety of the workers in the plant regulated? For example, who is the regulator and what are the kinds of audits and inspections that are done and how often?
Well, like I guess in this province, you're under OH&S regulations. But OH&S regulations are minimum for every industry and every job site that's out there. That's why we fought for 5 years to get a process safety management code of practice. It deals only strictly in refining only. And in that document, it gives operators the right to be involved in MOCs, which is management of change. I know some of that haven't dealt with it. MOC is management of change. But in America, believe it or not, they got an MOOC. Not in our document, back in the province I come from, but an MOOC is a management of organizational change. So they can change the number of people that works in that plant in a day on an MOOC. Which, you know my thought on that, I won't say it, but that's the way it is. But as for the regulators, they come in on site. Maybe the same here, I can't speak for your regulators. But I know back home, they were not experienced refinery people. And there is more to a refinery than a scaffold plank or a hook on a crane. I'm sorry, there's more. So unless your inspectors are qualified to go around and do the inspections that the operators allude to and say, we've got a concern with this or that, and take it from there. But if they're just walking in and taking everything that management tell them, I'm sorry folks, you're going nowhere. That's just the way it is, reality. As for inspections, back at our plant, we had a good inspection for a number of years. Then we went off track. We got a new COO that started on the refinery 10 months ago. His heart is in the right place. We just got to give him the benefit of the doubt to get back to where we're to.
Thanks. And I'll give you the last part of this question. Does the refinery submit its own data or is it independently gathered?
No, the refinery got their own QC department that does their own inspections and keeps their own data in their system. It's available to anybody want to see it if you go through hools and hools of paperwork to request it. It's just not there. As the co-chair of the safety committee, by law, I've got a right to ask for the documentation and they're supposed to give it to me. That's our regulation. Now, it hasn't been a problem, but there's a lot of inspections that's done, that's fall away, and that's it. Something happens, they'll all come out. Sad part.
I'll touch a little bit on that. Inspections in the refinery are an ongoing, continual process. There are many different types of inspections that do occur. Vibration analysis, X-ray inspection on piping, thermographic inspection on heaters. Some of it is done by our own in-scope inspectors. Some of it by out-of-scope inspectors who are employed by the refinery. Some of it is done by independent third-party inspectors, usually the X-ray technicians. So inspection is an ongoing process. It's not something that happens just occasionally. It's pretty much every single day there are inspections that occur. The data is kept by the refinery, I understand. I don't know the regulations of what must be reported to who. Again, if you would like to know, I encourage you to call the refinery management and ask that question. but it is something that occurs every day.
Okay, first of all, I did write my city councillor and complained about the residential development, and therefore, you should answer my question. I want to know if there is a difference in mission statement and procedures between a refinery that is privately owned by Esso or some honking big company and a cooperative.
That is a very difficult question. Mission statements. That is something that each individual company will have as their own, and I don't think it makes a difference if it's a cooperatively owned or privately owned. Every company will have a mission statement that is the core of what they believe in. I think that's a good thing to help identify what that company stands for. The company's mission statement isn't necessarily the workers' mission statement.
Correct.
The workers' mission statement is to work safely, to protect our co-workers, to protect the equipment, to protect our neighbors, and to protect the environment. That's our goal. I don't know how to answer that any differently than that. Thank you for contacting your councillor. I certainly encourage individuals to do that and to become involved with City Council, with their local politics, and have their voices heard. It's what this society is built on. So thank you for that.
If I could add to that, Dan, a true mission statement is jointly put together. If one side just can't put out a mission statement. All stakeholders got to be in agreement of a mission statement, to be truthful. A lot of companies say they're open, honest, and transparent. Well, that's a mouthful, I tell you. But to be open, honest, and transparent, you got to have the backing of your operators, whether they're union or non-union, and your workforce, to have a true mission statement.
Hi, my name is Jens Peterson. I'm the MLA for the area that encompasses the operator here. I guess I'm wondering, there's a couple pipelines that run through my constituency, and they're not that far away from the refinery. And I guess I'm wondering, is there a potential that if there was a major incident on one of those, that it could cause a major incident in the other one? Like if we had a pipeline explosion, could it actually cause, problems at the refinery or vice versa? And like, if we had a major incident in either of those, like how big of a blast radius are we talking about here, or evacuation zone?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, pretty much. Of course, anytime there is an incident anywhere, there is the possibility that it could affect neighboring industries, including the refinery. Your question was extremely broad and difficult to answer because, to start with, it could depend on what pipeline you're talking about. Whether it was a crude oil pipeline, whether it was a natural gas pipeline, whether it was a propane or butane pipeline. So very difficult to answer. I'm certainly not qualified from my aspect to talk about potential blast radiuses, evacuation zones. That is something that would probably fall under the Regina Fire Department to ask a more informed, or to get a more informed answer from. Again, specific product that's involved will have a tremendous effect on an upwind or downwind evacuation zone, whether the product is sour, whether there's H2S involved with it or not. So I really don't have a good answer for you because the question is very broad. That's the best I can say.
And I can't comment because we got no pipelines in Newfoundland, there's too much rock. You can't get a pipeline in anyhow, but the only pipe you got is what's in the refinery, right? They got no natural gas there. But just to add to it, what's in your pipes is safe. If somebody got a cause to get out of the pipes. So if it's not preventive maintenance, now if it's sabotage, you can do what you like. It's going to come out of the pipes. Right? But quite honestly, pipes are safe if they're maintained and looked after.
Okay, my question is this one? I guess it's on. Okay, so where do you see technology affecting processing safety for the future? Like the mining industry is going into big data and Internet of Things. You've talked about over and over that the expertise is embedded, like the knowledge is embedded in the experience of workers. And some of the concerns I've heard regarding the co-op refinery in particular is we don't have good documentation. We don't know necessarily where everything is being kept. Like the drafting and the drawings aren't necessarily up to date. The paper versions, they've weathered, etc. So my question is, how do you see the technology affecting safety? Can you see it as an advantage, especially when we're looking at the big data and the Internet of Things going forward?
Well, that's a difficult question. Technology is the way of the future. Cost paid is paid. We got old P&IDs back in our plant that was put there by Procon in 1970. They're still legible. You can still read them. You can still trace them. But your P&IDs are only good if they're updated from the changes you make in your plant. Right? If you got a pipeline that's 200 feet, but 2 years ago you added another 150 feet onto that piping and don't update your P&IDs, whether it's computerized, technology, or paper, it got to be upgraded to match it. But they're in the process now, back in our plant, of putting everything on computers. Technology is just, you know what it is. I got a grandson, 5 years old. I can do more on my cell phone than I can do. That's just the way it is. But it can be done. Don't ever think it can't be done. It can be done, but once again, it got to be done correctly, that all the information is there, that if you need it, you can pull on it.
Can you also comment on protecting it, which is another big thing, when it's up there on that cloud?
Okay, I'll start with the technology. Absolutely. Technology will help safety operations of any business, as far as I'm concerned. The ready availability through technology of information and data greatly simplifies problem solving. It simplifies all of our safety programs and aspects, because the program and all of the data and information that we need to access is readily available when it's online. Now, this is not a process that happens overnight. The plant has been there for 80 years, and there's 80 years of data to try to digitize and get onto a computer system. And that is a massive, massive undertaking. So that type of thing is definitely helpful. It is the way of the future. It can't happen overnight. It has been happening for a number of years, and it is continuing to happen and continuing to improve. As far as the protection of it, I don't believe anything is out in the cloud within the refinery. I believe it is all fairly safe and secure. Everyone out here has likely been affected at some point in time by a virus coming in through an email. I know that we have some outstanding workers within our union in the information technology department who work diligently, as well as do the management people, to protect our computer systems from viruses from outside influences. And it's an ongoing and realistic problem. I have yet to see any operational issues caused by something like that.
I have a question here that many of you might have an answer for. I'm sure there are many answers to this one, and I'll read it. What barriers exist or are at risk of preventing workers from doing their best and safest job? It's a pretty big question, and unfortunately we have only 2 people to answer this, but I suspect there are many answers out there. What barriers exist or are at risk of preventing workers from doing their best and safest jobs? Question of barriers.
If I could start, I don't know if it's a barrier, but I know a lot of refineries now, the workload on the operations people is much too great. Operator fatigue now is a bigger issue than Trudeau's draw weed he put in 2 months ago. It should be a bigger concern for any organization if you're wearing your operators and your workers down to a frazzle. I'm going to tell you, they are not concentrating the same on their 12-hour shift if they had time to rest up and time to spend with their family and go back energized. I see it in my plant, no doubt you see it in every other plant that's in the world. Operator fatigue is a big thing this day and age.
I don't know that I would speak to barriers that exist. I would maybe look more at what opportunities are out there to ensure that we are working as safely, the workers are working as safely as they can. And those opportunities are there. They involve communication amongst work groups. They involve a safe attitude of the workers. A safe attitude of management is essential as well. And a willingness to cooperate and work together to perform your task as safely as possible. It's not a barrier that exists, it's an opportunity to do better.
And if I could add to that too, no matter what industry you're in, whether refining, university, or a grocery store, your safety culture got to start from the top and come down. That's where you get the true meaning of safety. When you can see your top officers taking safety seriously, then it will change some of the culture that's in your workforce. But if you get a group that don't give a hoot about safety, how's the little fella on the shop floor or out in the trenches going to care anything about it? You got to start from the top and come down. I'm sorry, that's the way it is.
How do you handle the legalized marijuana in your industry?
Well, that's a big question. There is no regulations out yet. Trudeau put it in the little corner stores, you can buy it, but no one knows how much you can smoke or when you can go to work when you got it in you. But our policy back at our site, we got a drug and alcohol policy, I won't get into details, but we're telling all our members, 24 hours before you go to work, don't have a draw. Because if you have an incident or they suspect something, we will represent you. That's all we can do. But alcohol has been legal for 100 years. I can't get up in the morning and drink 40 before I go to work. So how people can think they can get up in the morning and have a couple of draws before they go in? No, I'm sorry you can't. That's my take on it.
There's a big difference between marijuana and alcohol.
Oh yeah, but still, if you're impaired, you're impaired.
Yeah, you are.
You got to be in your full wits to go to work. If you don't, you're asking for trouble.
You want to answer this one?
The company has a drug and alcohol policy, and again, that's not something I'm allowed to talk about, their policies and procedures. I encourage you to contact the refinery and ask them what their policy is and how they plan to enforce it. That is their policy.
I believe their plan is zero tolerance.
Well, you'd have to ask them what their plan is, sir. I'm afraid I do not speak for the refinery management. The truth is that it is vital for everyone's safety that all workers are working in a non-impaired state.
Exactly.
And that is something that we as a union and as workers absolutely support.
Yeah, a question here, one for Dan and then one for Perry. Dan, as I noted at the beginning of the talk, I think we've got to change out this mic actually because it's kind of fuzzy here. I'm just going to go over here.
Okay.
So that's better. Dan, a question for you to start and then one for Perry. As I mentioned at the beginning, I reached out to the Co-op Refinery and FCL, Canadian Fuels Association, and none were available to participate tonight. As long as I've lived in Regina, there haven't been like opportunities for the community to engage like this. In the 37 years that you've worked at the refinery, what opportunities have you seen where there's been like open houses or opportunities to engage with the refinery, and maybe it's through like FCL with co-op members asking questions? Can you think of anything there?
Not offhand. No. I'm sorry, I can't.
Because it kind of, I know, Carol, I gotta stick to the rules here, not say anything, but when the St. John, the Irving explosion occurred, they do a lot of community engagement. In fact, more so than our cooperatively owned refinery, and I found that to be quite surprising and disappointing. Perry, can you speak to the type of community engagement, community liaison committee that exists at the Come By Chance refinery?
Yeah, I can. Like I say, once again, like Dan, I can't talk about particulars at refinery, but we've got a community liaison group that the 5 small communities that surround the refinery. Now, there's no one directly close because no one wants to build by the refinery, but we got 5 small communities. Every quarter, every 3rd month, the mayor or one of the councillors from each community come in on site for a meeting. We usually got 3 people from management there, which is the COO and a couple other officials. Then you got government officials. As a union, we're allowed to sit and listen, but we got no say in that meeting. We can take a few notes on what's happening, but it's not a true community liaison committee. If everyone was allowed to speak at a community liaison committee, both management, union, and the people that live around there ask questions, then you could get the true story out to the folks that's living in the area. But I'm going to guarantee you, not all managers tell the truth. I'm sorry. That's the way it is. Not all of them do. But if you had a group that can sit and discuss the items or the issues and get someone to rebut if something is said out of place, then you get a much more effective committee. And it'd be more beneficial for the surrounding communities, the people that's working there, the people that's living there, and the people that eat and sleep that refinery every day.
Given the urgency of addressing climate change, I'm wondering what the future of oil refineries is, and that's a kind of broad safety issue, the safety of the earth. And related to this, Regina City Council just passed a motion to make Regina a renewable city, and I wonder what this might mean for the co-op refinery.
That's a darn good question, and I can tell you I have no idea. No. Whether the city is able to actually achieve that will only be determined by time. Climate change certainly is something that is a reality. It's a concern, a very real concern, something that we as workers have no control over, but do encourage and promote everything we can to make our industry as green as possible. That's not green smoke, that's green environmentally. But again, anything that would affect that really would be a policy or procedure, and that's something that you would need to contact the refinery and ask what their plans and intentions are.
Hi, I'd like to say thanks to Dan and Perry for being here, and to Sean and Eagle for organizing this really important opportunity. Perhaps it's historic. It's pretty disappointing that somebody from the refinery management and FLC is not here to join us. It would be really nice to be able to talk to them directly. I wonder how open they are to hearing from people in the community with these questions that we have. So that's my first question.
You'd have to ask them how open they are. I'm sorry. I would hope they would be open to questions from the community. Building that trust with the community will do nothing but help everyone moving forward. That is the reason that we, as I'm here representing the workers, is it's important that the community understands that the workers are very serious about the safe operation and the safety of this refinery and every refinery. And that is why we are here, to let you know that you're not alone in your concerns for safety. We are there as well. We are living in the middle of it. We are working in the middle of it. And it's our most important concern.
It is great to hear from you, working so close inside. Frequently I smell the emissions. Sort of depends on the wind direction. I'm pretty sensitive to smell, so I get up in the middle of the night and I close all the windows. I wonder what we're breathing in.
Well, there's emissions and there's odors. They may be two different things. Again, that is a fairly specific question that you're asking about what types of emissions are coming from the refinery. That's not something I am able to talk about. Again, I encourage you to contact refinery management and ask those questions.
I figured you might say that.
I'm sorry.
I also think you'll probably have a similar response to my third question. I can't remember, 3 or 4 years ago there was something on the radio. A CBC reporter was, somebody at CBC was asking the minister, can't remember which minister or his name, about the levels, the safety levels. And I think he said, or I think they were asking because the levels of the refinery are 10 points above the safety level. He didn't seem to care too much.
Well, without knowing exactly what he was talking about, it's pretty much impossible for me to comment on that. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I don't have more detail. Thank you.
I would like to listen to your recommendations in how do we train our young engineers coming out of our faculty here at the University of Regina to have this safety culture. Often the engineers are put in a position where they are the safety engineer and they lack that experience. How do we teach them that respect for experience and expertise? How do we get them to meet the manager's demands to make the money? They're caught sort of in that middle position, in that sort of supervisory position. They're not really managers. But what do you think are the things that we can be doing in the short little window of 4 years that we have with them to ingrain and develop that safety culture?
Well, that's an interesting question. The best way I can think of to try to, and I'll say this very carefully due to some of the people in the room, train an engineer is to simply try to impart the knowledge and experience that we have gained over the years into their training through discussions, through question and answer, through politically correct reminders of procedures, to respect the experience of the operators, because they've probably, an engineer comes out of school with a lot of theoretical knowledge but no experience. Right. And the only way they're going to get experience is through time. And some engineers come through and are willing to and excited to put in the work to learn their job and to gain that experience and really embrace a safety culture. And sometimes others aren't as good at that. It's an individual thing, and I think that's true not just in refineries, it's everywhere in life. We've had some very good ones, and we've had some that could have learned more. But experience and listening to the more experienced, whether it's engineers or operators, is the best way to educate and instill safety culture and a safety practice in an engineer or an operator as well.
And if I may just add to that, you got to have a commitment from your management team to allow them to do it properly. I haven't seen too many kids start to run before they crawl. Same way you come out of school, whether you're in the safety professional, or whether you're a firefighter, or whether you're an engineer, or whether you're a process operator. If you don't get the grassroots of what you're doing, you're going to end up doing it wrong. And until you can take a particular topic and know it like the back of your hand, I'm sorry, it's going to take time to get there. That's just life. It's the way it is. And I know I'll speak for the whole world. When you come out of school, I've been there, you think you know it all. But if you go on a job and think you know it all, stay home. I'm sorry, because you don't. But you got to get that training and that knowledge from seasoned people that have been there to know what they're talking about. Not a young buck, not against young bucks. Not a young buck that got 2 months experience in a unit, and a new engineer comes on site and says, how did this work? This goes here, that goes there, this goes somewhere else. Is it factual? Both don't know. So it goes down to learning what you got to learn in school. You're going to get your feet wet. But you got to go to your neck before you really get trained up on it. Easy way I can put it.
We have a question here. Emily?
Hi. Thanks both of you for coming out tonight, and thanks to Sean for organizing this, and thanks Dan for coming to the course that Sean and I taught at the Lifelong Learning Center a while back. I just wanted to follow up on, maybe it was this gentleman, maybe it was somebody who's already left, talked about a risk assessment that was done. Is that publicly available? And I have another question after that, but yeah, I just wanted to know where I could find that.
I have no idea.
It's basic, most of it's redacted.
Right.
Yeah.
But that was the city of Regina's.
You can read about it in the media, but my understanding is that report was, I can't remember the name of the consultancy that carried it out on behalf of the co-op refinery. And that report was with the city, and there was a access to information request for that. And then there was a legal disagreement over that, so that went to the court. The judge settled it and said, we'll release these pages from the report and the rest is redacted. That's my understanding. And I believe you can find that on, Jeff Leo reported on that, I think a couple of years ago, Emily, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So there isn't any place that, since then, that it's been made public?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. And then the second question I had was just about how you think the community might be able to, like where are the pressure points, I guess, for members of the community to get the kinds of answers that we'd like from the refinery? What would you suggest as the best strategies? And I know you keep saying like phone the co-op refinery, but folks have good, PR. And I guess I'm wondering about what you think would be the most effective approach to get the management to become more engaged in the community and in, speaking with us.
Well, that's a loaded question. And my answer is going to be very similar, I think. If the community has questions and wants answers about something, the only way you can get them is to contact the refinery and ask. You can also, I guess, if you wish, go through city council, go through your MLAs, asking questions, pushing whether it be local or provincial government to get their input, to have them come on site and ask questions. I really can't make a recommendation of what you should do to get more information other than to just keep asking questions. And I encourage you to have your questions answered. I just can't do that. I don't have the answers to many of your questions.
Maybe I can, not being from Regina. You've got newspapers, you've got media. If you send 3 requests and don't get information, put it in the paper. Put it on the radio stations. Send it to your counselors. Eventually someone will listen. Because when they get tormented by a lot of reports, newspaper, requesting information on such a thing, and the management did not reply, that's bad PR. Very bad. So how can you come out in the community and put up big billboard signs and everything else, we're a community involved, we like to protect the community, but they want to answer a question? Use the media. That's all I can say.
I think for the young engineer, they need to understand the process first. Then they need to understand the operating condition related to each process. Then they need to understand the hazards related to that process. So I am teaching refinery for graduate course in our university. My question about the waste oil sludge. Is there any treatment related to this sludge? Is there any inspection related to the soil inside the refinery and outside the refinery or not? Thank you.
Did you hear the question? Did you hear that question?
I believe, if I can repeat it, you were asking, is there any type of inspections on waste soil or waste sludge, yes, oil sludge, and on the soil as well? That's not something I can really answer. I'm sorry. Again, we're talking about specific refinery issues, procedures, policies, emissions controls. That is a question I'm not authorized to talk about.
As safety only, is there any inspection related to this?
I don't know an answer to that question, if there is or not. I honestly don't know if there is or isn't an inspection on the soil. Please contact the refinery and ask them that question.
Perry, is that something you can answer?
Well, I can, but we don't have a problem with the soil, because we don't have a big lot of soil. We got mostly rock. But our concern is the sea, the Atlantic Ocean. So the company is regulated on pH levels after the fauna goes down to the fauna holding basin on what they can put out to sea. So they got limits they got to go by. They exceed that, they get in trouble.
Because if there is some heavy metal, definitely it will pollute the soil. Pollute the soil, it will affect the productivity of the soil. So it will affect everything. It will affect the food.
Well, you know, like I say, the inspections they do back in my plant, I can only speak for my plant, I don't know what's being done here. But everything, the big concern is the ocean. Right, we pollute the ocean, we're down. Simple. You don't want to protect, you know, you got to protect your ocean. But as for the soil that's around the refinery itself, who knows? I can't comment on a couple things, but who knows what's underneath your refinery itself? You may strike another oil field, who knows?
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Walid Mudir. I just have a general question. Is there any plans for upgrading this refinery or not?
For upgrading it?
Upgrading, increase the capacity.
To my knowledge, there is no plan that I'm aware of as far as increasing the capacity. That's the last I had heard. But that's a decision that's made by management, it's not made by the workers.
Okay.
The best answer I can give you is not to my knowledge, but that's only to my knowledge.
I just wonder if we have something similar to USA Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board here in Canada or not. Because I see a lot of like videos for accidents, they analyzing that, kind of. So I just wonder if we have something similar.
Perry, do you want to?
That's a difficult one. Can you?
It's called the USA Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board. Let's say after any accident at any refinery there, they would go there, investigate everything, and usually they put videos on YouTube about what happens, what actions, you know, things like that. Yeah.
I'm not aware of a government board like in the United States that it does investigations within Canada. Investigations on incidents are done by the occupational health and safety officers on any type of serious incident in any workplace. To my knowledge, that's the only group that would be doing an investigation like that.
Okay.
And if I could add to that, our international union in Pittsburgh deals with 48 refineries in America. So the USB report that you're talking about is made public to those folks.
Yeah, okay.
All right? But in our network, we've got, with our site and the ones in America, we can get a copy of all those reports. We just got to ask for it and we can get it.
Okay. So the simple answer, we don't have something similar, right? Here.
In Canada?
No. In Canada, no.
Not to my knowledge,
okay.
no.
Not my knowledge either.
Here's a related question that might be more closer to home. Someone would like to have each of you speak to the reporting culture found in your organizations, that meaning the reporting of incidents. What is the culture like there? Perhaps the incidents, the fullness, or releasing information. Can you speak to the reporting culture in your organization, Dan?
It's growing. I would say that. I can look back over my 37 years, and I would say that we have improved tremendously in our reporting of incidents, in our understanding of what is an incident, in our respect for incidents and ensuring that that they are reported, because it is important, and in learning from them. I think that's a process that can only continue to improve because you'll never be perfect. So I would say that we are working diligently to continue to improve in that avenue.
Yeah, I'll add a comment on that one. I spent 2.5 years reviewing incidents, investigation on my site. We don't have a problem with reporting the incident. I must say our workforce is very positive in reporting incidents and getting it corrected. But when you get to the point that someone gets disciplined for reporting an incident, your reporting goes out the window. It's not the way it's supposed to be. We've had different programs on site, and I'm going to be honest with you. Behavior-based safety, throw it out the door. You're only ratting on your fellow worker to just get a supervisor the answer that he wants so he can discipline someone. I'm sorry, I'm not in favor of it. But I am in favor and encourage every one of our members to report incidents, because you can't correct a problem if you don't know what the incident is. So by reporting the incidents, you can deal with them, work with it, and get it corrected. That's why we work on incidents. Now something just come to my mind, the lady that had the question on emissions. Go to your city council and ask them to force the company to put monitoring stations around the out perimeter of the refinery. We've got that back home because we got schools that's close by, and the sulfur that's coming off of the stacks on times was just choke you. So they got 3 monitoring stations that they got to be monitored and report to the government weekly. That way, if there's any emissions coming off on a certain day, it's picked up on a certain day. Okay?
Are those mandatory? Is the reporting weekly mandatory, or is it like?
Yeah, well, they see it's done weekly, and in their quarterly meeting they have with the emissions, with the government, they must give that report on emissions that was picked up prior to the 3 months. Or if they exceed what they're allowed, they got to report it.
Is that also, like, are reports of that included in the community liaison meetings?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Those monitoring stations exist. They're part of our permit to operate from the Saskatchewan Department of Environment. So the gases aren't, I mean, there are monitoring stations out there as well. It's not that there is no monitoring at all. That's simply not true. For what those levels are and what the reports are, again, that's something you'd have to contact the company about. But they do exist now.
But they're the company's own monitors? Or
They're required by the government.
Yeah. But they're controlled by the company.
So the company would report to the government the results of it's not as if the monitoring stations are the government's own operations and they have access to the data independently.
I believe that it is a correct statement, yes, but it's something that is required to be maintained and operational as part of our license to operate the refinery.
If I could just make a follow-up comment, I spoke to somebody from the Ministry of Environment. There are 2 air quality monitoring stations at the refinery. There was a 3rd before, and I can't remember, I'm not certain on the neighborhood, so I'm not going to say it. But my understanding was that it was seen as redundant, or it wasn't no longer needed, so that was removed. So we're down to 2 now, and my understanding further is that it's not live reporting to the Ministry of the Environment. That's my understanding, at least, of it, that it's captured by the refinery, and they are required to report exceedances that occur. And we have a spill registry in Saskatchewan, which is in the public domain, which I think is H2S and other types of exceedances should be there. They should be there for sure.
But I know our plant back home got a call-in line. So you wake up 3 o'clock in the morning and you can't get your breath because your window's open. You call this call-in line and someone got to reply to you. Okay, then someone got to go check the monitoring station and see why you can't sleep comfortable in the night. But that call-in line is recorded and reported. So if someone don't do anything with it, it goes to the government. Now whether they're going to do a lot with it, God only knows. I'm not at liberty to say. But there is a line there that you can call in for the emissions if you get a lot of smoke and dew in the air.
Questions out there? 2 cards.
I have one more question. Sorry, I'm not going to get up to go to those microphones, so hopefully my question gets picked up by that one. How open to a community liaison group? You're from Unifor, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Would Unifor be like? Would the workers be? Would they be like willing and supportive of an initiative, like a community initiative like that?
I would say it would be a tremendous initiative to have encourage involvement and participation with the community, to try to have a good and respectful flow of information and a cooperative atmosphere to work with our neighbors. So from a worker's perspective, from the union perspective, I would see no reason why we would not be very in favor of something like that.
Awesome.
I did have a comment to make on the question about, there's a couple of questions about waste and that, and I don't know a lot about it, but I do know this, and it was partially reported in the media in September of this year, that the city of Regina did receive more revenue than it expected, and one of the sources of the revenue was the co-op refinery. And my understanding from the source is that that the wastewater treatment plant treats heavy affluent from the refinery, and that was where that extra revenue came from. But I think to Dan's point, it would be interesting to follow and get more information about that, and then future plans of where to store waste from the refinery, and after all, it does sit on top of an aquifer as well. So,
are there any other questions? And I would also like to invite questions to which you don't actually expect an answer. and I say that not about the answers we've had, but just because you think there should be something that gets asked and the question remains in the air. Is there something that we ought to be able to think about?
What is the long-range plan for the refinery? How long is it going to be in existence?
Well, as a representative of the workers, I hope for as long as the workers are able to work. Long-term plan would depend on, I guess, economics. As long as it's making money, I would think they would be wanting to have it there. If it's not, then and perhaps technology changes, making petroleum fuels redundant, then it no longer becomes viable. But I would think it would be there as long as it's a viable commercial entity.
Bit of a follow-up question on that. Does the refinery offer a worker training program to reskill workers and stuff in the instance that, say, it doesn't become viable? Like it's not economically viable anymore.
I think if it got to that point, that would be something that would be subject to a negotiation between the company and the union, and would deal with the specifics and the realities of whatever workplaces and times are like at that particular time. So that would be subject to whenever it would actually occur and subject to negotiation.
We have a question here.
Those steel workers.
Good old steel worker, is that what you said?
How much foreign oil do you refine?
Almost every barrel. We're in a very peculiar situation on the Rock of Newfoundland because we're owned by Americans, we're running Russian crude, so we really don't know which flag to fly. But most of our crude oil comes from the Middle East, a lot of it from Russia, overseas, majority of it. We do run some of the offshore oil, but the offshore oil is a very sweet crude and light. Our plant was designed for heavy gear, right? Something like the Co-op Refinery here for heavy gear. But they did make some changes. We do bring in a shipload every now and then of the offshore product. But most of our stuff comes from overseas and is shipped to Boston and New York Harbor. That's the biggest seller of our product. There's only about 5 to 7% used on the island. We only got 550,000 people there altogether. Not everyone buys North Atlantic refining fuel, but that's roughly the rest is shipped up. It's all tanker.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can you talk about where the oil comes from?
Yeah, our oil is 100% Canadian. We refine Canadian oil from Saskatchewan, from Alberta. Heavy, usually. There's a large blend, a large mixture of different types of crude from different locations, but yes, we do refine heavy crude. We also refine some synthetic crude from the oil sands area, but it's all Canadian crude.
Shipped mostly by train or truck as well?
I believe it comes in mostly by pipeline.
And on that topic, Dan, does it leaves on trucks and rail as well? I mean, is that correct?
Various products leave by truck, by rail car, by pipeline. So that there's quite a mix. We fuel Western Canada, remember?
I saw that on the website.
But just to add to what the question is, if you're refining 140,000 barrels a day, you refine a crude, your product got to go somewhere. You ain't going to ship by train 140,000 barrels a day or by truck. So you got to go whichever way is safest to get there. So if a pipeline is the safest way, I lots sooner see a pipeline than a tractor trailer on the highway. To be honest with you. Right? So the one wrong move, you know what you got, a disaster.
Any other questions, including ones to which you don't actually expect an answer?
I'm good at those questions.
Well, I don't just mean that you can't answer it, but for example, this is a very informed audience, and there have been carefully worded questions and carefully worded answers, and sometimes that couldn't be answered. But I'm just wondering if there's something, as we come to the end of the evening, that has not been said, that questions that are hanging in the air, or statements or ideas that are hanging in the air that have not been said. You might think about what it is that brought you here and what you hoped you would have heard. And if no one else says it, I invite you to do that.
What What about a question from the moderator? Is this what you're getting at, Carl?
Oh, well, no. Well, that is my question, actually. What brought you here? What did you hope you would have heard? What were you thinking you would have heard? And did you hear it? Or if it could be said, what would it be?
Well, what did you people learn from what you heard here?
Well, if I may start, what I hear from tonight is you folks got the same problems that we got back home. Exactly. There is no difference. But if you don't be out, now there's no company going to give you their trade secrets. I don't care who they are. And if you think that we're up here and they brought me up here to shut down a refinery and badmouth someone, no, that's not what our union or any union is about. It's about making the workforce safe and viable. Now you make good money, sure. You work in a risky business. But still don't mean to say you gotta do it unsafely. There's no one that worked in any refinery that I know of in Canada or America want to shut the place down. No one. But they want it to run so you're not polluting your communities, you're not polluting the environment, and you're making it safe for everybody to do so.
Well, you know what I'd like to see? Another refinery at Felton, Saskatchewan, over the bacon oil field.
Yeah, we asked for that roof lamp and didn't get very far with it.
You're too far away.
I have a question from the back.
Hi, I was just wondering, what are the dangers and impacts of transporting the oil by train, by rail, as opposed to pipelines? I don't know, so.
Well, I guess you could just look to Lac-Mégantic for that. I mean, that's a very real danger of an accident occurring. As Perry said, pipes are pretty safe. They don't move. As long as they're inspected and maintained, they're a pretty safe way of moving oil or any type of product. When you come to rail cars, there's always a potential for a derailment. And with any derailment, you could have a release of whatever product it's carrying. Some are very volatile, some are not. But the risks increase when you're moving through either a truck or a rail car versus a pipeline. It's a reality. And it's not that the train operators are doing anything specifically unsafely, or that the truckers are driving unsafely. It's a reality that you can't control everything on a road, you can't control everything on a rail bed. Pipes are they tend to be safer.
I guess I'm just worried about just spills that happen over time. I mean, there's been pipes that leak after years, and I guess in my mind the idea of a collision with a vehicle on the road that's carrying oil is far higher because it's a vehicle on the road compared to a train that's on the tracks. And I know these accidents happen. They can happen in any work environment. But for the sake of someone who's concerned about the controversies of these pipelines going into the ground, I'm just trying to weigh the pros and cons in my mind about shipping the oil on train versus pipe, I guess.
Again, if you're weighing the pros and cons, that's a personal choice that you have to make. There are risks either way. What the level of those risks are can depend on the particular environment or perhaps the weather at the time. Whether the trucks have been maintained, whether the pipeline has been maintained properly.
I think he had mentioned earlier, there's a lot more oil that's able to move faster through pipe than it is on rail. Is that what you said?
No, I said the amount that you can move through a pipeline versus a rail.
Okay.
You got a rail car, what's it holding? Dan, I don't know offhand, but maybe a couple thousand barrels.
Okay.
The loaded rail car.
So it's more efficient for moving it.
To be honest with you,
in a high volume.
Yes.
When it's in a pipe.
Right.
Yes.
To be honest with you, if it stays in the pipe, it's fine.
Okay.
But like anything, if you got a rail car that's not inspected and it starts leaking, you got problems. But if you got a pipeline that's not maintained and inspected, you're going to end up with problems.
The problem with new pipelines, as I understand it, is that if you're going to pay for a new pipeline, you've got to expect it to last 30 or 40 years. And we have to get off oil if we are going to save the world, save the earth. We've got 12 years according to the UN climate group, and we have to get off oil. So if we put in a new pipeline, the one that's running just south of Regina is line 3, if we allow that pipeline to go through, that's 30 plus more years we're going to have the oil industry, and we're done according to that report.
Well, I've got my thoughts on it for what they're worth. But this world will not survive without oil. You will not put enough electric cars, electric planes, and everything else that you got a byproduct of petroleum that you use every day unless we're going to stay home and live in an igloo and just freeze to death. Now that's my honest opinion, and that's from the bottom of my heart, and no one asked me, no one told me to say that. But your oil industry, I'll give you a prime example. How many people here are carpool tonight?
I came on the bus.
All right, the bus still burn diesel or it's electric. But if you don't get people carpooling rather than 5 vehicles come here with 6 people and 2 vehicles come with 6 people, you're cutting back on your emissions. So you just can't take the oil industry and say it's polluting the world. It's not. It's everything else in it that's polluting the world.
Eagle, do you have a question?
Oh yeah, I was wondering, does the co-op refinery own the pipelines that come and bring oil to it and take it away?
No, the refinery doesn't own pipelines.
Okay. So like, even talking about the pipelines really is a bit of a moot point because you guys don't monitor the safety of them or have any ownership in them. As far as like the safety and community concerns come along, right?
We have, I think, some involvement in some propane and butane pipelines. And I know we participated in some of the inspections on those. As far as ownership, I can't speak to whether the refinery owns them or they're owned by someone else.
Yeah.
Other pipelines are owned by Enbridge. They're responsible for their pipelines. That's really outside of any jurisdiction of the refinery.
Yeah. The reason why I was asking that is because I'm curious about like monitoring of those pipelines. Like, are they double hauled? Are they monitored end to end? How often are they monitored end to end? Things like that, because like living in Regina, like all of our basements are just destroyed, like every spring, every fall, you know. So you gotta be curious about the things that are in the ground too.
Valid question, absolutely. You'd have to speak to the individual companies that own them.
Yeah.
I know my house is right beside a high pressure gas pipeline, so it's not like I'm not concerned with that as well.
Yeah.
But dealing in the industry and working in it for so long, it's truthfully not a major concern of mine, just from an experience level.
It seems that there are no more questions coming forward unless someone has a burning question. And so I would like to invite each of our speakers to offer a last word or his goodbyes.
I'll start. Thank everyone for coming out tonight and asking your questions. I would say that what I've heard is a concern for safety, a concern for the environment, worry that that you as we as a community are as safe as we can be. And those are all valid concerns, concerns that we as workers share with you. You're not alone in wanting to feel safe in your homes. You're not alone in wanting to feel that the environmental issues and impacts are a concern. They're a concern to everyone. And I would just say that we share those feelings and those concerns with you. And thank you tonight for coming out. And thank Perry for coming out for Newfoundland.
I agree.
Well, thanks folks for having me here. You might have understood every word I said. I talk about a Newfoundlandese, right? You know, I go to a different province and there's a different slang for some reason. I don't know why. But no, it's been great coming here. Your questions are great. Your concerns are the same for where to, what you got here. Environment is a big thing. You got to protect your environment. You put too much, you burn up the ozone layer. They say it's healing a bit now. The last result come back, it's gradually healing a little bit. But the more you put out, the more it's going to do damage. But you can produce, refine, manufacture anything on the face of this earth. If you do it properly and got your proper controls in, it's quite safe to do so. You know, you can get a serious injury operating a snowshoe. You can twist your back and may never walk no more. And you get snow. We get a lot of snow in Newfoundland, a lot of snow. But you can do that, but you got to take your time and do it properly. So if I told Dan and the boys at Union Hall and Sean, going forward, if there's anything I can do from our end to help out with anything, we've got a network with refineries in America. They got different law in America. They can keep it. Canadian law is not that strong, but American law is twisted a lot more, I tell you that. But if there's anything we can do to help you out, a problem in one refinery is a problem in all refineries. Bottom line, like I said before, you're boiling oil. Thanks for having me here.